God bless you this morning. I hope God has been good to you this week, and if not, I hope you just have a great time this morning and find some peace and some joy and hope to take with you when you leave here today. You know, I love to travel on roads. I don't like to drive for like long periods of time, but I just love to be on roads and experience new things. And we've traveled all across the United States, like 48 different states. We've traveled like over a dozen countries. And there's so many really cool roads that are out there, you know. The roads that take you to places that you're like, whoa. Even in our area here, I mean, I don't know how much you've experienced getting out and driving on some of the roads. A few years ago, I was privileged enough to be part of the U.S. Census. And so I got to travel all around out in the Charleston and Bassendorf area, and I got to travel clear out to out some of the rivers on the east side, and there's some incredible roads and just some massive beauty out there. In fact, I found myself often stopping and taking pictures because of these amazing roads. And so I think most of us like to experience, roads that are unique and different, but none of us likes to end up on a road that's a bad road. And by bad road, I mean one that maybe it's full of just potholes and we're just driving along for a long time. Even if you've got a four-wheeler, it kind of gets old after a while, just up and down and bumpy. Or we don't like to be on roads that are so narrow we're like at risk of damaging our vehicle or maybe even hurting ourselves. Or roads, and some of you may have been on these roads here, you're driving along and then the water gets kind of deep on the road and you're like, do I dare go across or turn around? And if you've ever gone across, then that's probably helps your decision making the next time, because you're like, no, I don't want to get stuck again, so I'm going to turn around. Or a road that, and this is probably for me the scariest, you're like alongside of the edge of a mountain, and the road is narrow and there's not even a wall beside you, and you're looking down like this, and it's just kind of scary. Those are the roads we don't like. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about roads. We're going to talk about good roads and bad roads, because Jesus does that. He talks about roads. He's always using the things around him, the illustrations that people understood from their own experiences, to explain some of the things that he has to say. We've been, for the last, weeks 9, it was like week 9 or 10. I think we're in week 10 actually this week here of our series called Living in the Kingdom. It's actually a report, if you will, or a breaking down of Jesus' greatest sermon, the greatest sermon anyone's ever preached, the most famous sermon, the most quoted sermon ever by anybody, called the Sermon on the Mount. And we've been talking about this because this sermon that he's preaching here is not just a bunch of messages. It's about living in this thing he calls the kingdom, which he talks about in Mark, and he says the kingdom is here upon you, repent and believe the good news. So there's this good thing about the kingdom. What's different about this Sermon on the Mount, unlike most pastors when they preach and take on like a topic and then kind of expound on that topic, Jesus seems to cover a lot of topics in this Sermon on the Mount. We've talked about all kinds of topics in the things we're talking right now: judgment and worry and prayer and righteousness, and they're all embedded in this one talk. And there's a lot of things we've had to skip in the first couple chapters. It's only chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. 3 chapters. It's about 10 minutes long. I know it seems like a short sermon. It's probably not as short as it seems, so don't give Jesus too much credit for short sermons, because it really is probably a sermon like a lot of his that we read about that lasted all day long. And so we're getting just snippets of this entire sermon. And because of that, some people think that maybe this is actually a collection of some of his different pieces of different sermons, sort of like a greatest hits of Jesus kind of a sermon thing, an album of Jesus' greatest hits. And it's possible that's true. More likely, it's just pieces of sermons that are all gathered together in this sermon he preaches, and not just this time, but throughout, that everywhere he went, he was preaching these messages. And so the disciples and those around would have heard the same sermon or pieces of the same sermon over and over, dozens, maybe hundreds of times over the 3 years that he's preaching. So they're hearing this. You might wonder, well, how does it they remember these sermons? Because I know by Tuesday, I've totally forgotten what Pastor Rich is talking about. Hey, listen, I lose it all by Wednesday, so don't feel bad. But these people remembered it for years, even decades, and they're writing about it as if they were just there. It's because they heard it so many times. Some of you are like that. You can remember an address you had 40 years ago because you did it so often. You're like, I don't remember my own name sometimes, but I remember that address. And this is the way these disciples are. But we've had to skip a few things as we've gone through this. And unfortunately, we're going to have to skip a few things even today, because we've just got today and next week. That's going to end the series, and we're going to do a short Easter series. But today I feel kind of bad because we're going to skip some things that are really pretty important. We're going to skip a section on prayer where Jesus, and you know this, Jesus says, ask and you will receive, right? Seek and you will knock and the doors will get open. We're going to skip that completely today. I know you know it, but we're just not going to do it. It's a great part. There's another part we're going to skip, though, and it's probably one of the most known verses in the Bible, not just by Christians, but by non-Christians. And so much so that we've actually given it its own kind of term. We call it the Golden Rule, which says, do unto as... See, I don't even need to preach this. You already know that, so it doesn't even matter. But we're going to skip that as well today, and we're going to talk about some other stuff. But one of the problems in maybe making an assumption that this sermon in Matthew is like a collection of different sermons, that it really wasn't something he sat down and preached, but it was like, oh, they pulled this thing from here and this thing from here, and they just, used some literary license and put it all together into one kind of a sermon, which there's nothing wrong with doing that. But the problem with thinking about it that way is not only that Matthew doesn't present it that way at all, but you lose the impact of what Jesus is actually talking about here. He's not just giving these individual little little statements and sayings for us to follow, like Confucius and all of his stuff. It's really like he's got this overriding theme. And the theme he's talking about is the kingdom. It's all about the kingdom. Everything he says in this, in fact, pretty much everything he says all the time is about the kingdom, about what the kingdom is like and what the kingdom means and how do we live in the kingdom. And it's not just something he does in this sermon. It's really a pattern that he does throughout all of his ministry here and throughout all of his messages and his events. It's, for example, Matthew 4:23, right before the Sermon on the Mount. He hadn't even started this yet. Right before it, here's what we read. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. So he's already teaching, already got little sermons going, little sermonettes, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. So you see that over and over wherever he's going. He's preaching this good news of the kingdom. So the Sermon on the Mount is just one little longer sermon, but again, quite shorter than I'm sure it really was, about him teaching the good news of the kingdom. And he says that he's healing every disease, every sickness among people. The good news is that the kingdom is here, and it's now, and it's for everyone. And that was a message that nobody had ever thought of before, nobody had ever heard before, nobody could understand. And so Jesus comes along, and I'll talk about it more next week, but he doesn't preach like everybody else. It's not like he just gets up and kind of shares what this is all about, and uses some big words and goes into the ancient Hebrew words and all that. It's like Jesus knows this almost as if it's his writing. It's his words. Like he's the one who wrote those words or inspired those words, and he preaches like nobody else. And there's an authority that he carries, and that it seems to be, as we read in the New Testament, that seems to be what motivates people to follow Jesus and listen to him. It wasn't that he just told them what to do. It's like he knew. He just knew. I often wonder, we know Jesus was fully human, fully God. We know this. But I often wonder, if you were in the room with Jesus with a bunch of other people, would he stand out? And I think he would. I think there would be something about him. I think when he looked and he's preaching, and if he looks over here and he begins to preach, I think you would think, Carol, that he's talking to you. Sue, he's talking to you. Sharon, he's talking to you. Dennis, he's talking to you. Joe, my new friend today, he's talking to you. That he would just connect with you. He wouldn't say your name like I did. He might not even really stare you very long, but I think you would just sense that somehow not only was he talking to you, but that he knew you, and that his words had special meaning to you. And you would think he was talking only to you, even though everybody else that's watching him would think the exact same thing. That's what I think about Jesus. I think there was something unique, something special about him. Well, we're going to get way off on that, and I don't want to go there. So for the last 2 chapters, he's talking again about the kingdom. And he's talking about life in the kingdom and all this. But then in chapter 7, he sort of takes a turn and goes kind of around the corner, and he begins to bring it home. He begins to land this plane, and it gets very personal. And it's not anymore about imparting knowledge. It's not about inspiring things. It's not about giving them things to ponder and think about. What Jesus wants now is he wants this sermon to impact the crowd. He wants it to change something in them in some very real ways, and he wants to see their lives different. And what Jesus is doing here is he's, in this last chapter, chapter 7, is he's giving them an invitation to transformation. He's inviting them with this opportunity to accept what he's been saying to them and to live this life in the kingdom. He's not forcing anyone. It's an open invitation for anyone who is listening to not just hear what he's saying, but to apply it to their lives. And so to apply it and to create a significant and a meaningful change in their lives. And isn't that what they all want? To have significant and meaningful. Isn't that what we want? To have significant and meaningful changes in our lives. That's why we do almost everything we do that we think about doing, is because we want meaning, we want significance, we want our lives to matter and to be the way we want. So in the first 94 verses of the Sermon on the Mount, he's challenging them to do more than just to learn, to change and to grow. But then in these last 15 verses, Matthew 7:13 through 27, he's inviting them to accept this option for transformation, fully total transformation in their life. And what he does here is he uses multiple contrasts, like this and this. There's this and there's this. These many, many, many different contrasts that he uses here. For example, there's 2 different gates. There's 2 different roads. There's 2 different destinations. There's 2 different results from those destinations, fruit from those destinations. There's 2 different responses from those results. There's 2 different builders. There's 2 different houses. There's 2 different foundations. There's 2 different outcomes. All of this and others he kind of brings together in these last 15 verses. Lots of contrast, and probably we're going to look at one today, and a little bit one more. And then next week we're going to look at another one. And they're probably very familiar to you, but we're going to kind of pull them apart a little bit and look at exactly what they mean. And what you see throughout this whole message here at the end is that Jesus is pressing for a decision. He's not just giving them something and then sending them out. He's pressing them to actually make a decision with their lives, to decide right there. Will you follow or will you not? Will you live the life in the kingdom, or will you live somewhere else? He's asking them to make a choice, to decide, to choose a side, to pick a team that's right here. And we've been talking, he's been talking about the good news in the kingdom here, and everybody is invited, and he's told them what all this life looks like in the kingdom. But then he gets to the end of this, and he says, now each one of you has a life. And this life is full of decisions, but you need to decide where you're going to go. And the question for you is, how are you going to live your life? That's really a question for all of us. It's really a daily question, actually. Not even just a daily, it's like a moment-by-moment question. You get to this decision. How are you going to decide? You get to this decision. You get to this argument. You get to this situation. You get to this temptation. How are you going to decide? How are you going to make your decision? How are you going to choose? And Jesus says, I'm going to offer you 2 choices. I'm going to show you what they look like. I'm going to show you where they lead. I'm going to talk to you about the people that follow them and what happens to them. And then in the end, it's not just something you get to go home and file away in your drawer of sermon notes. It's for you to make a choice. It's for you to choose. And what I'm trying to say, he's trying to tell him, is that this, whatever you choose, is going to be the reality of your life. And I want you to pick a new reality in your life. Now, it's not a new message for God's people, because this kind of a message, this idea of a choice, is literally littered throughout all the pages of Scripture. For example, Moses in the Old Testament. Moses goes back into Egypt, and he brings the people out of Egypt, and he gives them the law, and he gives them the ark, and all this kind of stuff, and they're wandering out there. And he leads them up to the promised land. And of course, because of some disbelief and some lack of faith. They don't get to go in the promised land. And he leads them for 40 years. Listen, they're not on their way to the promised land anymore. They were at the door of the promised land. And God said, nope, sorry, you didn't trust me. That door's closed. You're going to sit here for another, till this generation has passed. What ends up being another 40 years. And they're literally, folks, just wandering in circles. You ever feel like your life is that way? Like you're right there, you could just, why doesn't it work out? But you're just wandering in circles. For 40 years, the Israelites, one whole generation, listen, if you're the generation that wandered up to the door there and decided not to go in, your generation, all of you, is going to be gone before you get to enter that. And so Moses is there. He's been leading him. He's given them the law. At the end of his life, he gets down. He talks to them again. Here's what's happened. Here's what we've done. Here's the law again. That's what Deuteronomy is. It's the second law. He's just telling them the same thing again. And he gives them these final words. This is how he leaves them. He says, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you. So it's like I got a little court here. You know what you've done, but here's your witnesses. The heaven and the earth are going to witness against you. And I witness against you. And I have said before you, here's the first of these two options, these contrasts that Moses gives, life and death. You want door number one, life. You want door number two, death. Well, that seems like an easy choice, right? But he's just laying it right out there. You got life and you got death. Blessings and curses. So if you don't like the life and death thing, then here's the blessings and curses option on the door, the paragraph on that right there. Now choose life. That's what he's saying. I'm telling you right up front, it's not like, Monty Hall, or who's the guy doing it now on Let's Make a Deal. I don't remember. Wayne, anyway. It's like, you got door number one, you got door number two, door number three. Which one do you want? I take door number three. Okay, if you want, I'm going to let you change door number three for door number two. No. Moses says, listen, there's door number one. It's got life. It's got blessing. Over here, door number two, it's got death. It's got curses. I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you the inside scoop. Choose door number one. Life and blessings. Don't think I'm tricking you. This is the one. I'm giving it to you right up front. Moses says, choose life so that you and your children may live and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life. It's a message you hear all throughout the Old Testament. Not that many years later, after Moses dies right there on the top of Mount Nebo, and the next young man to start being the leader is who? Joshua. Joshua gets to lead the people after 40 years of wandering in circles, gets to lead the people across the river, the Jordan River, and now they're in the promised land. Problem is, there's a lot of other people in there that don't want him in there. So God says, listen, it's your land. I gave it to you hundreds of years ago, but you still have to conquer it. But don't worry, because if you trust me, you're going to conquer it. So they mostly subdue the land. I say mostly, because in some cases they didn't listen to God. And in those cases, they didn't fully subdue them. But this is the promised land. And by the way, I've been kind of studying this recently. There's some serious archaeological evidence to show that the Israelites were in the promised land at least 3,500 years ago. Archaeological, scientific. Okay, enough of that side issue. Joshua comes in. They get it all conquered. He lives his life. At the end of his life, he says, well, wait, when Moses died, right before he died, he gave this cool speech. I think I'm going to do that too. So he gives this other cool speech. And some of you know this. In fact, some of you have part of this speech on a plaque in your house, right? He says, Joshua 24, last chapter of Joshua, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River, back in Egypt. That's the ones they did, and before that even. Beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, here's the choice coming up, right? Then here's what you have. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods or your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites in Egypt, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. There's this choice. He's saying, listen, don't just wander through life. Choose, make a decision. If you're not going to follow God, then do it boldly. It's a failure. It's a lost life. It's death. It's pain. It's destruction. It's all those things. But just choose it. Don't just wander into it. But I'm telling you, choose life. That's what we're doing, my family. We're choosing life. We're going to live life. So he makes this choice for him. Which way is it going to be? What are you going to do? Okay. More modern context. 1979. A guy by the name, you may have heard of him, Bob Dylan. Anybody have heard Bob Dylan? Wrote a song, right? Not a good song. He didn't sing it that well, even I don't think. But here's my little rendition, you know. You might be the devil, you might be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. See, there's somebody you got to serve. You're going to be serving somebody. You can't serve nobody. You're always serving somebody. You may think you're serving yourself, but if you're serving yourself, you're not serving God. And if you're not serving God, you're serving the devil. You're serving the enemy. Every one of us has to choose. It's not an option. You will make a choice. Okay, back to Sermon on the Mount. Let me get to this first contrast we're going to talk about, because we're going to spend a little bit of time here. Jesus pulls out this contrast, and in this contrast, he's talking about two gates which lead to two roads. And here's what he says. And there's so many cool things in this. We'll just cover part of that. Here's what he says in Deuteronomy 7:13. Enter through the narrow gate. Right up front, he says, here's what you want to do. Door number 1. Enter through the narrow gate. And then he describes the two gates. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. Back to door number 1. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Every other year or so, I take some of my grandkids, and we go up the coast. We explore the coast. We explore history things. We do geographic things and natural kinds of things, and we have fun, a lot of fun. One of the highlights for me is something we do on the last day as we're coming back. It's up by Cannon Beach, and up way north on Oregon coast. And we go out to a little park there, Oregon Park, called Hug Point. Anybody been to Hug Point? If you are able to ever get up to Hug Point, do it before you die. Hug Point, short description right here. In the days of old, way before even the oldest of you were born, there were no highways along the coast. There's no Highway 101, not even good roads often to get across to the valley. And so because mail and travel had to happen, the best, easiest traveling places were literally the beach. In fact, the beaches of Oregon are part of the highway system. I don't know if you knew that. They are part of the public highway system. And back in those days, that's how people traveled. Well, most of the beaches, you can just travel along the sand, the kind of mostly damp sand. But there's a few places where rocks jut out past the sand into the water. And one of those places was what now is called Hug Point. Well, a bunch of people got frustrated that every time they wanted to go north or, or south from the north part, that they had to take their horses or their own feet out into the water and get all wet and come around. So a bunch of very inventive people got some picks and some shovels and some dynamite, and they literally blasted a road around this peak here so that vehicles could travel. And nobody does that anymore. Nobody travels on that road anymore. But now it's a cool thing. So I've taken most of my grandkids as we've taken them out there, and we've gone around, and I think a picture here of some of the girls. In fact, Mira, who's here today, was one of the girls. And you can see in the background there, Hug Point. And you can literally still walk around the entire point, from one beach, around the rock point, to the other beach that's there. Most of the time when Jesus is talking, we read these words of Jesus, we think that the whole thing has to do with salvation. But this Hug Point is not about salvation. This Hug Point is about living your daily life, just getting from one side to the other, getting back and forth, getting the mail, or getting to places that you wanted to go, that there's no other way. You can't go to the forest because there's no roads, there's too many trees in the way, there's too many bushes. So the easiest way is to go on the beach, but you couldn't because there's nothing there, and then Hug Point is created. But let me tell you this. Hug Point is a narrow road. I could say it like this, to paraphrase Jesus' words in this modern context. Wide is the road and broad is the tide that leads through the ocean, right? But narrow is the road, the entrance, and scary is the road that leads to life on the other side of that hill. Jesus is not always talking in everything he talks about, this idea of it's like life or death. One of the things you know about Jesus is he never browbeat people. He never tried to scare people into the kingdom. He never threatened any of them. And especially if you understand what he's saying in the Sermon on the Mount here, there's good news that's for everybody, and it's now. I don't believe at all in this context that Jesus is talking about life and death. Not in the truest sense. He's like not talking about your eternity at stake here. I think he's talking about the daily things that occur to us, the blessings and the curses. And maybe he's not just speaking about what happens when we die, but maybe he's talking about what happens in these decisions while we're living. Maybe he's just saying, this is the way of life. It's the way of life. It's what happens in life. And we see this in many areas of our life, over and over and over, things that where narrow roads are necessary to reach certain goals in life. For example, let's assume when you're younger, you decide you want to be a doctor. Being a doctor, the path to being a doctor is a very narrow path, right? You have to go to pre-med school. You have to go to medical school. There's books you got to buy, and labs you have to take, and libraries you've got to spend lots of time in, and papers you have to write, and lots of time, and lots of money. And then when you're done with that, you've got to do an internship, and then you have to do a residency. And if you want to be a specialized doctor like a surgeon, then you have to even go to more. And if you want to be a specialized surgeon like a brain surgeon or a foot surgeon or an eye surgeon, you have to go through even more. It's not like you just eat pizza, play video games in your parents' basement, wake up one day and say, wow, I'm a doctor. It takes some work. It's a narrow path. Some of you just watched the Olympics. Alyssa Liu, an American there, who won the gold, a couple golds I think she won in ice skating, figure skating. In fact, she won the women's single. And I can tell you, she did not get there by waking up and playing video games and watching YouTube. Lots of practice, lots of lessons, lots of time on the rink, lots of money put into trainers and training, and lots of soreness, and lots of guts, and lots of determination, and years of that merited her a couple gold medals. Let's assume that you want to be a concert pianist, Sue. Maybe there was a day when you wanted to be a concert pianist. I never wanted to, but some of you may have thought, oh, that'd be so cool, be a concert pianist. That is a narrow path. You have lessons and lessons, and you have to learn to read music, and not just the every good boy does fine, and the face as the space, and whatever, all the the sharps and the flats. All. You have to learn everything. You have to learn where they go on the piano, and it has to be like second nature. You have to be able to do it with your eyes closed. And then you have concerts and recitals and practices and rehearsals, more rehearsals, and lots of time and lots of money. It is a very narrow path. And that's why most of us don't ever get to those kinds of paths. If you want to become proficient at anything, and some of you are proficient at something, and maybe it's your career you did, or maybe it's just being good at something, or maybe you're a great parent. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes money, it takes all of those kinds of things. And it's not just in the grand goals of life. Sometimes it's just the daily things, like with our own bodies. Like, okay, so you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, probably need to change your diet a little bit. Maybe you need to lose some weight, maybe do a little exercise, maybe give up a few habits. Those are some narrow choices for you. You now have to narrow from, oh gosh, I can eat anything in the grocery store, to I have select things I have to eat, less sugar, less fat, those kinds of things. I can no longer have my sole source of exercise be reaching for the remote. I now have to get up and actually walk, or bend over, or stretch, or those kinds of things. There's things I have to do. It's a narrow path. It's much more narrow than all that. Let's talk about finances. Let's assume that, you're younger, and you think, I kind of want someday to own a home, or I want to, be able to retire at some point, or I'd like my life to be debt-free. And you have to take this narrow path. You have to work harder, and you have to skimp on some of the things you can't just spend your money wildly, and you have to learn to save it, and you have to invest it. And maybe if you do all those things consistently for a while, if you take that kind of a narrow path, maybe eventually you'll be at a point where you can retire early, or you can retire at all and not have to work. Some of you have retired, but you're not really retired, you know what I'm saying? You're really just tiring again and again and again. You're retired, right? and because somewhere along the line, we didn't make choices in the early days to do that, or something caused us to not be able to make those kinds of choices. And that's how life is. It's a narrow, restrictive path that leads us to these good things in life. That the path to success and great rewards is a narrow path. You can't just wander and end up at the right goal that you're talking about there. So maybe Jesus is just saying that's the way of life, that the road to success is narrow. But regarding the kingdom, I think there's one more thing that he's saying. Not only that this is the way of life, this narrow path, but that it's the way to life. That on the other side of this narrow path is life, good life, a blessing life, a full life. That's not just about great goals like, do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a concert pianist? That it's not just about the life plans we have. I want to lose weight. I want to be in better shape. I want to have more money. That in the kingdom, the narrow path is how you get what you really want with your inner heart, with your true self. And that's why in Matthew 7:14, he says, small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life. And because it's small and it's narrow, only a few find it. See, if you go through the small gate, if you take the narrow path, he says it's going to get you the life that you were created to live. That's what I want for you. That's what I have for you. That's how I made you. But I want you to choose the narrow path. It's going to be harder. It's going to take more time. It's going to cost you more. But on the other side of it is what you truly desire. It's the life that you really want. And it's going to open up to you a life that you can't even imagine. It's going to open up a life that you won't find any other way. I love Oregon. I lived here almost my whole life, except for a year and a half when I was a baby. And I love Oregon because you can drive anywhere and you see something different. There are places like Iowa. I'm sorry if I offended anybody from Iowa. You can drive anywhere in Iowa and it looks just about the same, just about. Years ago, my GPS got lost in Iowa. It's like, I think I was just here, you know. But in Oregon, you can travel from here 5 miles one direction or another, and it's different. We have rivers and streams and mountains and hills and deserts, not true deserts much, but deserty things here. And everything, swamps, fish, birds, deer, you name it. It's just everywhere. It's so, so different. One of the coolest places that I would like to get to, and I haven't been able to get to there because literally for the last 9 years it's been closed. It's a place called, it's in Oneonta Gorge. Anybody here been to Oneonta Gorge? Okay, so if you travel to Portland, go half an hour east, out in the area of Multnomah Falls, there's a little pull-off there. It's called Oneonta Trails, and you can travel that. And if you walk the trail, it narrows down and it gets to this canyon here, this slot canyon, and you have to literally leave the path and begin walking in the water. And as you walk in the water gets deeper and the canyon gets narrower. And eventually you have to wade through the water. But when you get all the way through this, again, very narrow slot canyon, on the other side of that, you're rewarded with this marvelous view of this waterfall that you can't see any other way. It's the only way to see this waterfall. Other than a helicopter or something like that. But if you want to see it, from the bottom where you can, it's the only way to get there to do that. Now, sadly, because of this Eagle Creek fire in 2017, it's been closed for 9 years. And they don't even know if they'll ever open it up. And for me, just in my heart, I'm like, it's so devastating. I would love to do that while I'm still able to walk, to get up there and to walk it there. This is the kind of thing that is so amazing. But a lot of people never get to experience that, because to experience it, you have to leave the main path. You have to get off into the uncomfortable path where you're walking on rocks and that are, going to slip and turn and stuff, where you have to walk in the water, just stepping into little puddles and avoiding it as you can. But it doesn't matter, because eventually you literally have to wade into water that at different seasons of the year is different. And you have to walk along these very imposing cliffs that are to your left and to your right. Ben, can you put back on the ones with the cliffs there, the picture of the cliffs? And at that point you're like, wow, it's like, this is amazing, but it's kind of scary. And see, there's the waiting one right there. But then at the end you walk through and it's like, it was worth it, because you walked from the common path where hardly anybody does. Maybe just a fraction, maybe 5% of the people that are on the actual trail actually leave the trail. It's a narrow path. and few find it because they just want to stay on the main path. And this is what Jesus is talking about. They never get to experience. They're not willing to go to the sacrifice, not willing to go to the work, to the work. It's a narrow path. And I wonder if that's what Jesus is saying about life. There is a narrow gate and there's a wide gate. And a lot of people go this wide gate. Most people do. And it doesn't lead them where they want. It's a failure. It's a losing venture. But there's this other one. But it's more work. It's more struggle. It's more stress in our heads the way we think about it. And we don't go that route because it's just too uncomfortable. But if we did, on the other side, it's something amazing. There's a poet, I think all of you probably heard of him, a guy by the name of Robert Frost. Two little asides on this. Robert Frost, two things. One, Robert Frost, almost a year before JFK died in that car in Texas, Robert Frost read some of his poems. He's in his 90s by this point, or close to 90, I think. He reads some of his poems in a place called the National Cultural Center. Most of you probably don't remember that. It doesn't exist in that form. National Cultural Center. He read this to a lot of people. 1 year later, right after JFK has been killed, they renamed the National Cultural Center to the Kennedy Center. It's kind of cool. Okay. The other thing was just a little thing. Robert Frost died the day before I was born. Okay, so I never got to experience him in real life, just his poems. But he wrote, he's like, if you look it up, he's like the third greatest poem in American history. He's the greatest poem in the 20th century in America. He won like 4 Pulitzer Prizes. Okay. He wrote some poems, but the one that you've probably heard before is a poem called If. And you probably don't know the whole poem, but you might remember the last line of the poem. And it goes like this. It's The Road Not Taken. That's the actual name of the poem. He says, 2 roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now that is a very cool poem because he's talking about these 2 roads in the woods, and he talks about them a little bit. But at the very end, he says, there's these 2 roads, and I had to choose. I could have gone this wide road that everybody goes, but I decided to go on the narrow road, the one less traveled by. And he says, that has made all the difference. Because when I got on that road, I experienced life. I found something new that I wouldn't have experienced any other way. That's what Jesus is saying. There's 2 gates, there's 2 roads, 2 paths, 2 destinations, 2 results from that. Lots of people are going to go this way, few people are going to go this way, but choose life. Choose the narrow gate. And this is where Jesus gets very clear and specific about how exclusive this path is. And a lot of people don't like this. A lot of people in America, a lot of people around the world over centuries don't like this. They actually get offended by this idea because what he says is this narrow way is not just a good way. It's not just the way that leads to life. But this narrow way is through him and to him. You see how exclusive that is? You see why people might get offended? Because in our culture, it's easy to think that, oh, Jesus was a good teacher. Almost everybody will believe that Jesus existed, regardless of what evidence they find. Most people believe, yeah, he was a real person. And some would say, many would say probably, that he was a good teacher, and a lot of the things he said, you can't argue with them. They're just good. He's just a very Gandhi-type, personalized kind of person. He's a very great person. But Jesus says, no, I'm more than that. For us, we see that, but for our world, we see him as kind of in this class of people like Muhammad, great person, wrote some great things. Buddha wrote some great things. Some people would say, well, yeah, but all roads lead to God. You know, all faiths kind of come together, and they all kind of say somewhat the same thing, different names, but the same God. And the truth is, that's not even possible. That can't possibly be it, because they contradict each other all the time. Some might say, well, I like the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, or I like the 5 pillars of Islam, or for me, I like the idea of karma in Hinduism, or I want to be this, kind of righteous, like some people I know have left their lives to become these religious, righteous Jews. And they like following all the laws of Judaism. And so Jesus, he's just like one of the options up there. You know, like you go down to Scoops and, hey, they got 59 flavors of ice cream, so could you get me a little bit of the mint chocolate here and the cookies and cream here, and I want the blackberry walnut, and just put it all together, you know, and it's all good for me. But Jesus, he says, no, no, no. I'm not just one of the option. That's the wide gate. I'm the narrow gate. I am it. In fact, he says it almost, I mean, you can't, the number of times he says this is very offensive to people who are outside of this. For example, John 10, he says this. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth. And I tell you, here's something I'm telling you, it's truth. I tell you the truth. I am the gate for the sheep. I'm the gate. Who's the sheep? We are, right? I'm the gate, he says. You want to go through the narrow gate? It's me. I'm the gate. All right, 2 verses later, John 10, verse 9. He says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. Again, he's being very exclusive. It's not like you can, well, Muhammad is a pretty nice guy in a lot of ways. You know, Gandhi was a good guy. Buddha's a good guy. You know, all this, it's all pretty nice. It's good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of good things these people say. They had a lot of good teachings. But I am the only gate. I am the one. Anyone who enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. Again, back to the sheep illustration. The thief, though, is the one who confuses you. The thief comes in only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come, door number 1, that they may have life, and not just any life. They may have it to the full. Later, John 17, he's praying now. He says, this is eternal life. Now he's talking about eternal life, the life after we're gone. That they know you, the only true God. You're the only one. Apparently there's a lot of other, you know, gods of sorts, false gods. But he says, you're the only true God. And Jesus Christ, me, he's saying, whom you have sent. But I think the most offensive thing he said, I'm just going to tell you, our culture really struggles with this. They do not like this exclusivity about Jesus Christ. Not my words, not my truth. It's what Jesus said. I just have chosen to trust him and to believe this. But they don't like this. Society does not like this. John 14:6, Jesus answered, I am the way. Not I found the way. I am the way. Not I am a way. I am the way and the truth and the life. Listen, no one comes to the Father except through me. That's it. It doesn't sound fair, it doesn't sound nice to everything, but it is the only path. And some would say, that's not a good thing. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the gate, I'm the road, I'm the path, I'm the hope, I'm the plan, I'm the one, I'm it. Some struggle with that. People get offended. Oh, it's so exclusive. You know, why is Christianity that way? It's like bad news for us. We have to choose him. We can't choose anything else we want. Listen, this is actually the best news ever. And the reason it's the best news ever is because there's nothing you have to do. Every other faith out there demands something of you. You have to live up to a standard. You have to perform something. You have to accomplish something. It's this checklist of do's and don'ts that you have to match up to. Jesus says, and you know this because we're human, you can't do that. It's not possible. So here I'm offering you door number 1. That's door number 2. I'm offering you door number 1. Just trust in me. Just believe in me. It's like the truest father. You know what I'm saying? A dad who knows his son or his daughter is never going to totally meet up to everything they expect. But they love him anyway. They bring him in. You're still my son. I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. It's not about what we can do. It's about what Christ has done. That's why he says back in the early part of the Sermon on the Mount we looked at, blessed are the poor in spirit. Not those who are righteous in spirit, who have it all together. No, the poor in spirit. Jesus, I have nothing. I am empty spiritually. There's nothing I have to offer. But I'm so grateful that you offer everything. It's all from you. But Jesus says you got to choose. There's a gate here and there's a gate here. You got to choose. Are you going to come through me, the narrow gate? Or are you going to be like everybody else and try and go through the wide gate? So Jesus is actually the path not just to eternity, but to a flourishing life. You know, sometimes in the church we take this truth and we turn it into a legalistic rules. We do that in the church. Someone gets saved, okay, now here's what you got to do. You got to start dressing right. You got to change your language. You got to, a bunch of habits you got to drop off. Oh, and by the way, you got to be in church every Sunday. You got to start tithing at least 10%. You got to figure out your gifts and figure out where in the church you're going to minister. And you got to do all of that. That's our list. See, we've taken this life and we've sucked it away and we've substituted for it our version of door number 2. Jesus says, I didn't come for any of that. He said, no, that's not why I came. That's not the good news. That's not what the kingdom of God is about. No, he says, I came that they may have life and they might have it abundantly. You can't have abundant life if you're in bondage to a list of rules that the church or other Christians have imposed on you. And by the way, he's not the only one that ever talked about that. David, in his very first psalm, that he wrote many of the psalms, almost most of the Psalms. And the very first one he wrote, he talks about this blessed life. And by the way, he also uses some contrasts. You see these contrasts all throughout Scripture. David says, blessed. We talked about that back in the Beatitudes. Blessed. Makarios. Happy. Fortunate. Blessed. Blessed is the one, here's door number 2, who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked or stand in the way of the sinners or sit in the company of the mockers. Door number 2. Blessed is the one who doesn't choose door number 2, but whose delight is in door number 1, the law of the Lord, and who meditates on it day and night. He takes the narrow path. That person is blessed. He takes the narrow way. That's the blessed way. And then he paints this picture. He says that person who chooses door number 1 is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season and whose leaves never wither. Whatever they do prospers. See, that's the path of life. That's the path of joy. It's the path of hope. That's the path of goodness. It's the path of purpose in your life. Door number 1. But then he brings it back to the other door. Not so the wicked who chose door number 2. They are like the chaff that the wind blows away. What's the chaff? When you get wheat for your breads, we don't even do this anymore because it's all done in factories now and with machines. But you'd have to get the wheat part separated because we only use a teeny portion of that. Everything else is chaff. Everything else is garbage. You take out the good part. What do you do with the rest? You let it go to the wind. It's gone. You don't need it. It's worthless. He says that's the people that choose door number 2. They have no value in their life anymore. They have none of the things that they wanted in life. And then he finishes and says, not so the wicked. They're like the chaff that blows the wind away. And he draws us to this other contrast, which is something like what Jesus actually brings us back to in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, likewise, in Matthew 7:17, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree, not only does it find good fruit, but it bears good fruit. And a bad tree, not only does it find bad fruit, but it bears bad fruit. Choose for yourself. You can take the narrow path from the good tree. You're going to take the wide path that everybody takes, which is the bad tree. John 15, he uses some similar imagery, except this time it's not about the tree and the fruit. It's about the vine and the branches. And when he's talking about a vine and a branches, some of us, because we grew up in Oregon, wine country, all this, we're like vines, they grow up and they're little things and they grow over. When he's talking about the vine, he's talking about the main trunk of the plant. It's the supporting. It's the one that goes down to the roots. The roots suck out the nutrients from the soil and the water and suck it up, and all of it comes through the trunk or the vine. And then the branches are everything thereof. The branches are where the fruit actually is born out there. He says this, remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. Right. It must remain in the vine. Cut the branches off, take them home. Say, Mom, I brought you some branches. We're going to wait and see until you grow some apples. Honey, you shouldn't have cut it off the vine. It's not going to grow any fruit. He says, neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. I'm the trunk. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Now, some of us look at this and we think, oh, it's kind of threatening us, isn't he? It's like, oh, son, you stay away from me. See how your life turns out. It's not going to know. No, this is not a threat. This is a promise. Stay with me and you're going to go somewhere. If you don't stay with me, if you wander off the trail to your own little trail, I was reading about Oneonta Falls this week, and there was a group that went up there, not to the falls, but they were on trails up there, and one of them wandered off on her own. They didn't notice her. And somehow she got too close to the edge, and she fell over, and she died. This is just like a year and a half ago. And I thought to myself, that's what we do. We're like, okay, Jesus, I'll be up with you in a minute. I'm going to go over and check out this for a second. And we take our own little path, and it's the path that leads to death. She said, no, don't worry about all those paths. We're going to experience something far greater. Just stay with me. Follow me. Let's work with me together. We're going to do life together. We're going to be in the kingdom together. We're going to have power together because you're going to be in my presence. We're going to do it together when you follow me, when you take door number one, when you're in me. So in this tree where I'm the branches and he's the vine, the trunk of this, there is so much goodness flowing through, that the connections are so perfect and beautiful in there that we are going to bear beautiful fruit, good fruit as well. When you choose me, he says, when you live life in me, in the kingdom, when you follow my plan, my thoughts, my words, my actions, when you're trying to be like me and see life like I do and treat people the way I treat them, when you do that, I'm going to fill your life, and your life is going to overflow with goodness and joy and hope and peace and beauty. It's going to be wonderful. Let me give you one more illustration. Back in about 97, I was youth pastor at a church, a different church, and we decided to take this outing. It's kind of a spiritual outing, but we hired a guide to take us who was also a Christian guy, good friend of ours. And he took us up into Washington, just across the river, the Columbia River. And we went to several places, actually. We did, some rock climbing and, whatever it's called. Rappelling, thank you, down there. Thank you. And we did some rafting. But one of the cool things, the first thing we did was we went spelunking. Okay? Spelunking means caving. We're going to a cave. And so we went to an ice cave. And here's the weirdest part. We got to the ice cave at midnight. I mean, let's be honest, folks. You're in a cave. It doesn't matter if it's day or night. It's going to be dark inside the cave when you get in a few feet. So we went to this cave. The cave is called Gular Ice Cave up there. Some of you maybe have been to it. And you walk down this like steps down into the entryway of this thing here. And after you get there, you can kind of walk one direction. And when you get to there, you get to this, what they call a crystal grotto. See, the ice caves, I was talking with Ben about this morning. He's been there too. Ben got to go in May, which is kind of the best time to go, the late spring, because there's ice throughout the whole thing. When we got there, there's ice mostly in one section. We were there in like August, or I think it's August or September and stuff. But there's these beautiful, ice hanging down, stalactites, and then these beautiful ice stalagmites from the bottom where the ice is dripped, and it's just gorgeous. But then he walked with us through this cave, this short path here, and he said, now I'm going to ask you to do something. You have to trust me. Those are always scary words to me. You got to trust me. Okay. And because, it's just hard to trust somebody else when you don't know what they're doing. But I trusted him. He says, you're going to have to get on your belly, and we're going to go through to another room. But to get there, you have to lay on your belly, and you have to scoot, and the cave is going to be right above you. And it's going to be a little scary at times. Some of you are like, oh. And today I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that because I'd get stuck. And probably I would. But I'm there, and I'm like, I can do anything. So I'm trusting him. I'm going, we get on this, we wander through this. And when we got through this very narrow vent, we got into this small cavern that opened up, though. We could set up, we could stand up in it there, and it's called, sometimes they call it the spider room or the crack room, because you got to go through a crack to get there. There's not crack. You don't do crack on your side. No. You got to go through a crack to get there. And the interesting thing was, we all had flashlights, and you always bring backup flashlights. We got them all. He says, turn them all off. It's all off. It's pitch black. You can't see anything, nothing, anywhere. There's no lights, no reflections. Today, there'd be lots of reflections because everybody would pull out their cell phones, and it'd be light all through the room. But no, back then, we didn't have cell phones. And then he lit one match. And the whole room lit up. It's like, wow, we can see. It was just this kind of cool, amazing experience. Now, it was terrifying. But the only reason I went in is because I knew my friend Ed had been there before. And I trusted him. And I knew that he had the light. He had that. See, Jesus invites us into this narrow gate. But we can trust him because he's already been there. And he is the light. See, Jesus chose the narrowest way. He walked the narrowest path. It's not like he said, okay, listen, I'm going to stand back here and I just want you guys to go walk the narrow path. No, he said, follow me. I'm walking the narrowest path. Just stay with me. Stay close to me. You'll be okay. And don't worry about darkness because I've got some light. We're all going to be good. I love what Paul wrote to the Philippian church. It's this beautiful description. Sometimes they read it at Easter, but it's this beautiful description of Jesus and this walking of the narrow path. He says in Philippians 2, Jesus, being in very nature God, right up front, he said Jesus was God. Don't question it. He was God. He is God. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Some of you, something to be grasped. Somebody's like, hey, wait a minute. I shouldn't have to do that because I'm this person, or I can do that, or I'm this role here. There shouldn't be some. Jesus didn't do that. He didn't say, officer, do you know who I am? No, he didn't say that. I'm God, he says, but I'm not worried about that. I'm not considering that. It's not a part of the equation. Rather, it says, he made himself nothing. You see the contrast there. God, everything, human, nothing. By taking the very nature of a servant. I can imagine the disciples are thinking, as they're hearing and reading this, the time when he washed their feet. What? Jesus, you can't do that. No, you got to be a servant. You want to be the greatest, you got to become the servant of all. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man. Look at this even further. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death. What? You can't kill God. Well, you can if he chooses to be killed. Even death on a cross, which to them was a curse. Death on a cross was a curse. The narrowest way. Jesus in heaven decides to leave heaven to come down here to earth, that the creator would become the created, that the one who has all the riches in the world would submit himself to poverty, that the one who has glory in everything would literally clothe himself with humility, the one who is unlimited would become a baby, the one who has infinite would become the finite, the one who has greatness in all areas literally becomes the least, the one who has no sin actually for us becomes sin, becomes our sin, the one who is one with God would submit himself to, for a brief moment, to be entirely separated from his Father. My God, why have you forsaken me? The only time he called his Father my God. Every other time his Father, every other time. But that time, there's a separation. He's never experienced that before. But he had to because he became our own sin. Who could imagine that the God who created all of life with 3 nails would be attached to a cross? That is the narrowest way. In fact, in the garden, he literally said, Father, if there's another way, if there's any other way. But in the end, he said, no, I choose your way. I choose the narrowest way. How could it be that a person who filled the expanses with stars could be confined in death to a cave? That's the narrowest way. That's what Jesus chose. Arrested, illegally tried, beaten, crucified on a cross, rejected by the Father, rejected by everyone who knew him, practically, except his mom and a few women. Placed in a tomb, forgotten. For us. And just when they thought it was the end, Easter happened. And he raised himself from the dead. And Paul goes on in that Philippians verse. He says, and because of that, because he submitted himself to that, therefore, because he took this narrow path, therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess and acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. That day will come. It's not here yet. Definitely not every name acknowledges that. But there will be a day, for right or for wrong, for good or for bad, whatever people chose in their life, whatever door and path they went to, there will become a day when everybody acknowledges, when everybody realizes he is the way, the truth, and the life. Remember what Jesus said? Small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life. But that's the road he chose. The narrowest road. And he says, I want you to take it. It's the road that leads to life. That's what I want for you. Eternal life, yes, but life here on this planet too. Life while you're here. A better life, a hopeful life, a peaceful life. I want it for you, an abundant life. But only a few find it. Only a few are going to take it. Because it's more difficult. It's not just coasting anymore. It's not just that. Jesus invites us into this kingdom life. He presses us for this answer. What are we going to do? You're going to choose this road and gate. You're going to choose this road and gate. I want you to choose this way, but you've got to make a choice. The narrow way. When you go that, you're never going to be alone because I'll always be with you. I'll never forsake you. So the challenge that I have for you this week is to live your life on the narrow path. And I don't mean that by going through and cutting out this and cutting out that, but following Jesus. Figure out what that means for you. To decide for yourself this week. Decide. Oh yeah, I already decided I'm going to follow Jesus. No, I'm saying, do you really? Are you really chosen? Are you really choosing him? Have you really said, I'm following that way, regardless of the cost, regardless of what that means to me? That's the path I'm taking. Not just today, not just tomorrow, not just this week, but next week and the week after and the month after. And as many years as God gives me, that's the path I want for myself. And I know it's going to cost me. And I know it's going to be difficult at times. And I know I'm going to have some pain along the way. Because narrow paths, hard paths like that do cost us a little bit. And they are painful sometimes. But that's the path of life. And that's the path I choose for myself. And there's going to be days when I wonder if I chose the wrong path. And I'm going to consider, maybe I should have chosen this. Maybe I should still choose this. But no, today I'm making that choice for my life. I choose you, Jesus. I choose to follow you. And when we do that, when we follow that narrow path, the road less traveled, it's the road of blessing. It's the road of joy. It's the road of hope. It's the road of life. Amen. Father, today as we stand before you here, Lord, people who have made decisions already for you, Lord, but today we want to redouble those decisions. We want to re-choose you and your path, not just that we want you to be our Savior. We want you to be our Lord, the Lord in our life that directs us. We want to follow what you said, Lord, and not just the words of the Sermon on the Mount and not just 10 Commandments, but we want to be like you. We want our lives to be vastly different than they are right now. We want everything to revolve around what you have for us, what you want for us, what you see for us, what you made us for. And so today we choose you. We choose door number A, the narrow gate, the narrow road, the path that leads to life. Lord, give us strength in that. Help us to be the light for others who are still trying to sort out these questions. Lord, help us to lead them and allow them to follow with us along this path. And in that, Lord, may we be your glory in the world around us and the light to those who need it. We ask it all in your name. We praise you.